Welcome to HR Voices, a podcast for independent HR and people professionals and the businesses they support. HR Voices is brought to you by the expert team at HR Independence Limited. We hope you enjoy.
Hi there, and welcome to another edition of the HR Voices podcast. I'm joined again by my co-host, Mary Asante. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Charlotte. So for our listeners, you would know that we typically have guests with us for our episodes, but we also do recaps after we've done a few episodes to help remind our guests of all the amazing discussions that we've been having. And I think in the last batch, from episode 39 to episode 44, we've had some really amazing and diverse discussions on various topics with some fantastic individuals, world-class experts in their fields. So we're really lucky on HR Voices in terms of the caliber of guests that we get and also the topics that we discuss. So episode 39, we had our legal partner, Amanda, talking to us about all the employment law and legislative changes that is coming into place in the workplace and is expected to come into place in 2025 and beyond as well. Then we spoke to Colin Hall on episode 40 from Biz Plans UK. And Colin talked about business planning and then the importance of planning for businesses, regardless of the size of business you are, and how beneficial that would be. Then Charlotte and myself had a couple of episodes where we explore some really interesting topics, one of them being Blue Monday. And thank you, Charlotte, for sharing sort of your experience and your personal perspective on Blue Monday, etc. And also we talked about HR trends for 2025, which invariably has AI at the heart of it, and skilling and upskilling of people, etc. So then we went on to speak to Canins from Retirement Pathway and shared her wealth of experience around retirement planning, the importance of it, and why it doesn't have to be an uncomfortable conversation or the elephant in the room. So again, another episode really worth listening to if you are thinking about retirement or if you look after your workforce and thinking about how you might be able to support them through that process. We spoke to Zoe. Zoe talked to us about a topic which is very close to my heart for a very personal reason, neurodiversity, and how employers will be able to support employees in the workplace who may be neurodivergent or who are neurodivergent, and how the workplace can support them to flourish and to be their best selves and to be successful in their roles. We then, in our last episode 45, spoke to Emma Bray or Emma Armstrong from I Choose Freedom. And Emma talked to us about the incredible work that they are doing on domestic abuse and how they provide shelter support for people going through domestic abuse, mainly mothers or women with their children, but also talked about the fact that they're starting to do work beyond women and children now. So with the recognition that basically it's not just women and children who suffer from domestic abuse, but to provide that support as well. So today we're just going to be seeing how we can pull it all together and from our perspective, Charlotte, on how these topics, very important topics, the conversations can carry on in the workplace and we can encourage people to keep the conversations going and to support people as best as they can.
Yeah, I think when we do these roundup episodes, I'm always astounded by how much we've covered and how diverse the topics that we cover are. I mean, we've gone from employment law to domestic abuse, and it's incredible, isn't it? So there's a lot there, and it's really rewarding, I think, isn't it, to feel that we are bringing so many things up on the agenda for HR professionals and small business owners.
Absolutely. And I think that's the whole idea of HR Voices podcast, right? To
Yeah.
cover a whole range of topics that are invaluable to our consultants as well as the clients that the consultants support within the workplace as well.
It is. I mean, I suppose really what we could do is start with the employment law stuff, because we've had the employment bill back up on the agenda, and that it's about to now go through Parliament and it's going through the approval process. And so once again, we're into working out what's in and what's out of that, and what's changed and what's going to be approved. So here we are again trying to work out what legislation we have and how we're going to work with our clients, and how small businesses need to understand what's coming through, and how we can get that message out there, and how they're going to have to adapt their policies, practices and procedures around that. So, I mean, I think we're on target now to get some of this stuff out by the autumn, they're saying, which we anticipated was where we would be. But potentially by the autumn of this year, we're going to have new legislation again.
Yeah. I think it's a changing landscape, isn't it? It's very dynamic with the new government, with lots of discussions ongoing. Like you're saying, the employment bill is now back on the agenda, going through Parliament. And so there's going to be a whole lot of discussions around the changes, with some of which, as you said, from autumn this year, we're expecting to come into place. But let's not also forget that within the past year or so, a lot of legislation has also already come into being, and that including changes in the unfair dismissal. So people going to have a day one right, but not you having to wait for 2 years before you qualify to bring an unfair dismissal claim. And this is going to have ramifications for employment from the point of view of getting your recruitment right in the first place, or even I would say before recruitment, making sure that you have the job specification, job description, etc. for the role you're recruiting for right, and also getting your recruitment process correct, recruiting the right person. But when they are in their job, supporting them by having a really good induction program in place, so that you give the employee every opportunity to be able to succeed in the role that they are performing, and also documenting things, having good conversations with people, so that if it's not going well, it doesn't come as a surprise or a shock, and don't end up being quite unpleasant when it gets to the point that it almost becomes clear to all parties that actually this is just not working out, isn't it?
The other analogy that you could put on this is it's like painting, isn't it? Painting and decorating. Your first intention is just to get the new colour on the wall, but actually you've got a huge amount of prep to do before you even go there with that. And I think recruitment is very similar. You've got to put in lots and lots of preparation. And if you get that bit right, then actually you're more likely to have the right person in the right job with the right behaviours and attitudes that fit the values of the organisation. And if you get that all right, you're less likely to need this period where you want to let somebody go without them having unfair dismissal rights. And of course, they will still have probationary terms, and it's likely that the unfair dismissal will match your probationary term. So probably what we're going to end up with is an increase in probationary periods. That'll probably be, rather than 3 months, there'll be 6 or 9 months. So it'd be interesting to see how employers adapt, and whether the legislation puts a stipulation on how long a probationary period could be.
I think it all comes down to best management practices, doesn't it? So making sure that I do believe once you get someone in the role, if you've got a good plan for them to follow in their first, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months in the role, with very clear targets and expectations, and you provide the right level of support for the individual, it will be there's a higher level of success, isn't it?
Yeah.
If you follow the pathway compared to you just dump someone in a role and you just wait and see whether they swim or they drown or sink.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
so that's coming in. And then, of course, we've had the neonatal care landing on the 5th of April. So that's really good news, isn't it, These?
yeah, that is very good news for especially parents in terms of being able to have additional leave in addition to your maternity or your paternity entitlement if your baby ends up in neonatal care, because they will require an extended period of care. Some babies might be in there for a bit longer, some for a shorter period of time. So it's really good that it's being recognized and that level of support is being provided for parents who would need it to cope and to be there for their loved ones and support the babies as best as and partners as best as they can through sometimes those it can be quite emotional. It can be quite stressful when your child ends up in neonatal care. So
And then you're potentially having to worry about whether you've got to cobble together sick pay, compassionate leave, unpaid leave, what you're trying to do with that maternity, paternity. It just becomes such a muddle. So it's very clear now that exists, which is really helpful, isn't it?
yeah, and a good
Yeah.
opportunity for companies, for finance directors, CEOs, HR directors, HR consultants, and everyone involved to really look at these family-friendly policies that you've just listed, maternity, paternity, etc., very carefully and review their policies and processes to make sure that they've actually factored this in and they've made plans to accommodate it and not wait till an employee contacts them to say, oh, my child is now in neonatal, before they start considering what they do. Legally, we have to do things about it anyway from the April, but it would be nice as an organization to have given thoughts to this and updated your policies or consider putting policies in place ahead of the 5th or 6th of April. So that really, I think, is positive. We had the carers leave and then maternity and paternity as well, didn't we?
Yeah, changes last year, last April. So here we go again with changes. And of course, what we have got is the increase in national minimum national living wage, the new employer NI requirements. So, I mean, that sort of almost leads us on a little bit to the chat we had with Colin, because that's going to significantly affect, well, wage bills, payrolls, and may then sort of push companies and HR professionals into being needed to look at the plans and the strategic plan for an organisation and potentially restructure and not carry out some recruitments, maybe even go through redundancy and redeployment activities. It pushes us into actually, have you got a good strategic business plan and how is that going to affect it?
It absolutely does. But before we go into that, there's also one really important piece of legislation, which is the third-party harassment.
Yes.
That employers really need to pay close attention to and make sure that it translates into something for the organizations that lends itself to them being legally compliant. For example, training or raising awareness in the workplace generally around sexual harassment, third-party harassment, etc., and how to handle it within their workspace as well.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I think you and I have both been doing risk assessments and sexual harassment training for clients. It's definitely creeping onto their agenda, but it's something that we really do need to promote, isn't it?
Yeah, so business planning then. You are absolutely right, Charlotte, in terms of the increase in national minimum wage, living wage, and the impact on organizations, especially SMEs, and also organizations that probably employ a lot of workforce on minimum wage as well. For most professionals, the impact is probably minimal because they mostly are earning above minimum wage anyway. But for a lot of employers and SMEs employing people on minimum wage, that is going to have huge ramifications. And like you've just touched on, some are seriously thinking about freezing recruitment. So not bringing any more people on board, either when people leave or for roles that they probably would have recruited for, waiting to see what happens or waiting to see new projects coming in or having their pipelines coming into fruition before employing more people. And we've also seen organizations thinking seriously and looking seriously at restructuring, which sometimes or invariably leads to redundancies. So people being laid off work as a result of not being able to cope with the salary bills for the number of employees that they have. So for economic reasons, etc., laying people off. So there are huge ramifications, but I think the good side, and there is a good side to it, which is for the individuals and the employees, because the cost of living is quite high currently. So being able to earn a decent wage for your hard work to support you, to pay your bills, etc. So that is the good side to it, right?
Yeah, it is. And of course, we all want to make sure that people have got a fair salary for what they do and a fair pay. So that's really important. But I don't know about your observations, Mary, but from some of the salary searches that I've been doing for salary benchmarking and things like that recently, I think I've actually seen a bit of a drop in the salaries offered. I think salaries are being affected as well.
Yes, there is that. Sometimes you look at salaries, and especially when you're doing a benchmarking exercise, and then you go, I'm pretty sure 5 years ago, this role was paying more than that. And what's happening now? So, yeah, there is that. There is when there's recruitment, the starting salaries offered for roles being lower than expected, or even sometimes lower than market rates, and in a bit to compensate for that. But of course, we just have to cite caution here that if you are an employer listening to this thinking, oh, I can offer a lower salary, you just need to make sure that whatever you offer somebody, they are earning at least the national minimum wage and not below that. Because if they are earning below the minimum wage, then you will be breaking the law.
Yeah, absolutely. And you have to think about actually whether the wage is fair for the role that you're asking people to do. Because whilst we end up seeing a lot of salaries because we do things like activities like salary benchmarking, we also see the list of tasks and the job responsibilities. And the job responsibilities actually need to be relevant to the salary offered, because sometimes you read these
Absolutely.
adverts and you think, my goodness me, there's a lot in there, and that salary doesn't cover it. And straight away, you know that the salary is not representative of the role.
Absolutely. And the knock-on impact is that you may struggle to recruit the right person in the role, or even if you end up recruiting the right person, they may not stay in the role for very long. Because, like you say, the roles and responsibilities way outweigh the salary they're being paid. So they will not be happy in the role. And as soon as a good one, a better one comes, they will go. So there are knock-on impact in paying under market rate or expected rate for roles for employers as well. So it's something to really consider. But yes, that's a whole lot. That in itself can probably be a podcast episode on its own. Roles and responsibilities and how much people are being paid to do their role. And that is a whole discussion on its own, isn't it?
Definitely. But I think Colin's point is very valid. He talks about how, and particularly as a small business, probably the bigger businesses have got massive strategies of how they're going to get on and do what they need to do and make money and keep shareholders happy. But actually in small businesses and in very small, so micro businesses, we don't necessarily have a plan, do we? Sometimes there isn't a strategic business plan, and sometimes there isn't a cash flow, and lots of the other things that we encourage our members to do, even though they might be a micro or small business. And that's what he was saying. You need to have a plan, because you wouldn't get on a bus and not know where it's going. You need to know where you're going and the direction of travel.
I totally agree. It's important to have a plan, and the benefits of having a plan, really, as you said, is that at least you've got a direction of travels, you've got focus, you've got a target that you are working towards. But for small businesses, the reality is that the plan probably changes quite quickly and quite frequently, because there are a lot of, I think Colin touched on the SWOT or PESTLE analysis, which is your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats to your organization, or political, economic, social, technical, legal. The impact on small business is huge, because if there's something going on in the wider economy, you've got no control over it. And if you're a small organization with a handful of clients, the impact on one client may have huge ramifications on your business and how you run it. So that then changes your plan, or could change your plan very quickly. But the point that Colin was making is that shouldn't be a deterrent almost from making plans. It's better and it's good to have a plan and review it as it changes rather than not at all. So that was, I think, what he was trying to drive home on that particular episode.
And you're right, because you said actually if you have adaptability and flexibility, then you can be more responsive, and you can change what you're doing and make sure that you counteract those changes coming through. So I thought it was really interesting listening to his thought process. And my goodness, Mary, you've just taken me back to my CIPD level 7 days with a SWOT and a PESTLE.
HR does love acronyms, doesn't it? Businesses generally loves acronyms, and depending on the industry you work in, there are even more acronyms. You can't
Definitely
get from that place.
No.
Yeah. Then you and I looked at some of the trends or key trends for 2025 in HR. And we look at some of the trends that we thought were important or would be important for 2025 is the AI adoption in the workplace, which will have direct impact on skilling, upskilling, and reskilling of your workforce. Because for some roles, for some functionalities, you may have to retrain people. For others, you may have to buy in the skill set, bring in new people to do that. And so training, retraining, etc., is very important when you're looking at your workplace, your workforce, what do we do, how do we do it, etc. It's great to look outside, but it's always better sometimes to consider your current workforce to see if there's scope to train them to do things differently or to do things better in the light of AI advancement and its adaptation and implementation in the workplace.
Yeah, I mean, again, are all jobs going to be taken over by AI? Probably not. But if we can not lose the experience we've got within the team, it's part of your succession planning, and actually it's part of total reward as well. So salaries aren't going to increase at the rate they probably have done because things are tight and we've got these other changes financially. Actually, maybe succession planning is the way to go, because if you can encourage the employees that you have within the business to learn new skills and to work cross department or just take on new roles rather than going externally, it's all good stuff.
Yeah.
Good for their development, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's good for their development. It's good for morale as well.
Yeah.
Within the workplace, when people can see career paths, progression pathways, etc., within your organization, because they can see how they can progress within that organization instead of they're constantly thinking of, okay, where's my next role going to be, or who am I going to go and work for next? They can look at what you are offering and probably see themselves in some of those potential roles, either currently or in the nearest future. So it's really good.
It helps retention as well, doesn't it? If people feel that they're developing in their role and they're learning new skills and the organisation's prepared to invest in them a little bit, then they're probably more likely to stay.
Yeah, and then the next bit we spoke to Anne about retirement planning. And I think the funny thing is that we all could relate or remember when HR managers and senior leaders of organizations could sit down with people and say, when are you thinking of retiring?
I can't do that now.
To now, where invariably people, and the power is in the hands of people to decide when they retire, when they want to retire, how they retire, etc., which I think is good and is positive, but did highlight that there is scope and opportunity, if done in the right way, for employers to support people to start thinking positively about their retirement plan, because it's a huge change from going to work every day to potentially not working at all within a period of time.
There's financial implications that you might not understand. There's probably requests for flexible working. People might want to scale down rather than just stop altogether. I mean, we all laugh and joke and say that we'd probably like to retire tomorrow, but financially, the mortgage won't survive with that. So it's an important conversation, and it just seems a shame that we've lost the ability to still have that conversation in the same way. And I completely understand why. And yes, what would have been done historically around you're this age, therefore our policy says that, so pack your bag, you're out. That's not good. But actually, in the same way that they've brought flexible working more into the conversation at the point of recruitment and things like that, which is really helpful and beneficial, it's a shame that we can't just help people plan and manage their exit in that way, in a way that suits them and suits the business, and just becomes a more pleasurable experience, because nobody wants to just leave. I mean, I think working part-time, scaling down, you want to do, again, succession planning. You want to make sure that immense amount of knowledge and experience is not walking out your door.
Yeah, so that there is, and I think the beauty of it is that there is scope to support employee in financial planning, mentally, emotionally, sometimes for them to really start thinking about retirement in a way that is not so stressful or dreading to them, because then they know that they can come to the organization, they can go to HR, they can go to finance or whoever is responsible and ask questions. I know some organizations, some of the larger organizations have platforms, they have third parties potentially managing their pensions for them. So it makes it easier for employees to have these conversations and to even play on certain platforms to model, okay, if I'm retiring in a year, what does my financials look like? If I'm retiring in 6 months, what does it look like? And it does help people that way. So it would be good if all organizations can seriously consider how they can make these conversations normalized in the workplace, so that employees, the fact that I'm asking you about my retirement funds today doesn't mean I'm planning to retire tomorrow. It can be for 10 years, it can be for 20 years, or it can be for never. That is within my control, I think would be really useful and very good. And actually, it helps both parties, doesn't it? It helps the employer, it helps the employee, because it will be helpful for me to be able to come to you to say, hey, Charlotte, I'm actually thinking about retiring next year. But 6 months down the line to say to you, you know what, I've changed my mind because certain things have changed in my life, which is now means that I can't afford to retire anymore. I don't want to retire anymore, but I want to carry on working and continue working. So I think that probably was what was missing that led to the legislation, which I think was well overdue, because there were, let's face it, there were loads of age discrimination when it came to recruitment, when it came to promotion, when it came to restructuring, and a whole lot. So the abolition of the retirement age or compulsory retirement when people are not ready, etc., did help in that. It helped the older workforce with lots of the experience, etc., and benefited businesses as well, not just the workers. But there is still scope for that discussion around, okay, I'm thinking about it, I'm ready for it. I may not be ready for it, but I want to consider it. Because pensions, planning for your pension should really start from day one of your employment, isn't it? It shouldn't be when you are 5 or 10 years or 2 years away from pension or retirement.
No, absolutely. We need to keep an eye on those things as we're moving through life and our careers, really. But what I thought was interesting is that where Anne and Colin crossed over a little bit is if you think about a lot of the HRI members and a lot of the small businesses that we support, that actually having a plan and thinking about exit is almost one of the first things you should do when you go into business. Because actually that might structure how you do business, when you do business, and how you plan for your future.
And I agree 100%. I may have said this before, but on a mini MBA course that I did a long time ago now, one of the modules, the first thing that the leader said is when you go into a recruitment process as a candidate, or do not focus on the salary you are going to earn, focus on what you will get at your exit.
Yeah.
And everyone looks at them and then they were like, yes, because you want to be thinking of not just the role, but your future as well. And it's the same thing that you just said, which is effectively start with the end in mind, what you want to get out of the whole thing. So it's really important. And it's very, I think, especially for people's mental health as well, when it comes to, because it's a huge change, isn't it? You may wake up tomorrow, you go from the key difference if I'm retiring today, is that I get up tomorrow and, oh, wow, this is so nice. I don't have to go into work. I don't have to do anything, etc. But then you may find that you might get completely bored because you've not planned what you're going to do after retirement. Or you might get completely inundated, as I said, because everyone is suddenly thinking, oh, you are now available. Can you pick up for me? Can you do shopping for me? Can you drive me here? Can you do that? And that in itself can also become overwhelming. So the retirement conversation goes beyond the workplace, isn't it? And spills over into your close family and stuff as well. So
yeah, and if you think again from the wellbeing perspective, we're so constantly available through emails, phones, WhatsApp, social media, all the sort of communication channels that employers use. It must feel really strange to suddenly switch all that off. And then, so then you're probably thinking, oh, okay, I haven't had many messages or emails today. So I would imagine the first couple of weeks must feel like a bit of a holiday, but after that, you must feel a bit lost.
Yeah, but again, it's one of those things as well where we just, I think it's beneficial. The takeaway from that conversation is that it's absolutely beneficial to think about your retirement, to plan your retirement, to seek help from financial advisors, sometimes legal advice as well, if necessary, just to really make sure that you are thinking it through and you're thinking carefully about what retirement means for you as an individual, for your family, and for everything else.
Yeah, good advice from Anne there. And then, of course, we did do a little bit of looking at health and well-being. So we touched right back in January on Blue Monday, where you and I spoke about my absolute dislike for January. But then also we talked about how you can make, well, employer premises, workplaces, just more mental well-being friendly, mental health friendly.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, January we talked about the fact that leading up to the end of the year with our people celebrate Christmas or not, there are a whole host of festivities around. It's not just Christmas. You have Hanukkah and you have a whole host of things. So there's a lot of celebrations around that year. And even if you don't celebrate any religious festival at all, it's also time to catch up with family and friends. And generally, it's a costly period of the year. And you go into January and then you have a wait. I think leading from employment point of view, most people probably get paid around 20th or 21st of December or sometimes earlier, because then there's that wait up until the end of January before you get paid again.
Yeah, it's a long month.
It's a long time financially. It's a lot of pressure on people. And then if you also think about the changing weather as well, it gets darker quicker, it's colder, it's all those sort of things, which gets a lot of mood on people down anyway. And the period downtime to reflect, think about, am I happy in my role? Am I not happy in my role in life, etc. So that's quite a lot going on in the mind for people. Hence, I think the identification that potentially by the 20th of January, which is the Blue Monday, most people are feeling down and feeling low.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course there's pressure around health and well-being and fitness and eating, and it's, well, resolutions, New Year's resolutions and all that stuff. So it just becomes a lot to take in and a lot to keep up with, doesn't it, really? I mean, it's nothing like a bit of sunshine. I mean, I have to say the last couple of weeks has been absolutely lovely with some spring sunshine and some of the spring flowers popping up. So I have to say it's starting to feel better, that we are definitely moving into spring, which is my favourite time of the year.
Yeah, so a little bit of sunshine makes a huge difference.
It does,
so
absolutely.
People smile more, people are a lot warmer.
Yeah.
And then we had that conversation with Zoe around supporting neurodivergent people within the workplace and what employers can do in terms of the raising of awareness, providing ongoing, and then for the general well-being of people.
Yeah, and I know this is a topic really close to your heart, so you're definitely more of an expert on this than me, but I find it really fascinating and I love hearing Zoe talk about it, particularly in how it can be considered and embraced in workplaces.
Yes, and I think the general concept around the awareness of neurodiversity, supporting neurodivergent employees, raising awareness, because it's not visible. It's not something that people see. It's just our brains, our brains are wired differently. We think differently, we act differently. We do things differently. Our social interactions, communications are out when we are most productive, least productive, etc., are all very different. And also recognizing that in terms of the strengths in our differences, rather than focus on, oh, just because I am different means I am worse. Being different does not equal to worse. And actually, there's lots of research, lots of evidence to support the fact that neurodivergent employees, because they see and think differently, bring a lot of value to the workplace, particularly when it comes to innovation. And yes, a lot of them may require support because in terms of the way they are managed, in terms of the way they communicate, they interact, it's different, but that's all it is, different. So we just need to be a lot more accommodating in the workplace and a lot more supportive in the workplace.
It's understanding and appreciating the differences that those people have, but doing it in a positive way.
Absolutely. And again, equality, diversity, and inclusion is a subject, it's a topic that, again, because it's quite broad, in terms of, if you look at the Equality Act alone, there are 9 protected characteristics. And under each of those 9, there is diversity within that as well. So it's a very important piece of legislation. It's a very important strategy to have within your business. Looking at equality, diversity, and inclusion, it's important to keep it active and alive in your boardroom discussions, in your teams, in your staff rooms, in your coffee areas, smoke areas, wherever it is, to talk about to increase the awareness of the importance of diversity in the workplace, the importance of inclusion in the workplace, and importance of equity. Because again, it's been proven that equality doesn't necessarily work, because different people would require different level of support, resources, etc. So it's good to focus on giving equitable support or equitable opportunities, so that, especially in this context, thinking about neurodivergent people, there might be people who might be very sensitive to light, for example, within the workplace. How can you accommodate them? There might be people who might not be able to tolerate high levels of noise, etc., within the workplace. How can you accommodate them? There might be people whose preference of communication might be typing, emailing, etc., instead of just talking to people. And there might also be people whose preferences are just talking, not through emails and stuff like that. So again, those are just few examples, but bring the issues to life in terms of going with the right. We are just going to communicate via email from now onwards. Might not work for everybody.
No, and of course the importance is having those conversations and understanding and listening and being prepared to be flexible and adaptable and to accommodate changes as best you can to help someone get the best out of their working day.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay,
and then we spoke to Emma about domestic abuse.
Yeah, I say we've gone from employment law to domestic abuse, and that one's a little bit close to my heart in that I've been supporting I Choose Freedom for a while. I've worked with them for a long time, and they do amazing work in the Surrey area, and they support women and children, families that are fleeing domestic abuse. As you touched on earlier, they're also now providing support to men who are also fleeing a domestic abuse relationship. Obviously not in the same places and different structures and different ways of doing it, but there is more recognition out there now for men as well as women, and they're trying to do their best, trying to keep their funding, which of course local councils and that keep making cuts to do the amazing work that they do.
Yes, so and I think Emma also touched on the fact that they also support people from the LGBTQ plus community. So
Absolutely.
Domestic abuse as well. So if invariably anyone who is a victim of domestic abuse, they will do their best to support. And Emma pointed out the fact that yes, they are not able to support everyone who reaches out to them, but what they are able to do is to signpost those individuals to other services who might be able to support them if they are not able to support them. And I think the discussion around how within the workplace employers can become more aware so that they can spot the signs of domestic abuse, how they can also become more aware of available services so that they can signpost people to these services. And I think, like most things that may not be right or are not right, people can become active rather than passive bystanders. And it doesn't mean you have to charge into someone's home and tell their partner off or do whatever, but really actively signposting people to services, checking on people to see if they're okay, how you might be able to support them. Like everything else that we've talked about today, creating an environment where people feel able to ask for help when they need help.
Yeah, because she talked about the psychological safety element, didn't she? So fostering a culture of psychological safety. And I mean, that's probably needed and right for many things that line managers look after with employees. So it's probably not just domestic abuse, that could probably be relatable to lots of other things like sexual harassment and discrimination and all sorts of things. But it was that idea that actually if you foster an environment that creates psychological safety, then people will feel more able to come forward and tell you. And they might come and let you know that they've just left their home, they've packed up their belongings and raced out and left their home, moved into a refuge because they're fleeing domestic abuse, or that they are suffering domestic abuse at home and they don't quite know what to do and where to go, which must affect their work.
Yes, invariably. If we reflect on bringing your whole self to work, people going through serious emotional, mental, psychological abuse will not be their whole self at work, would they? They will be lost in their thoughts, they will be scared, they will be thinking about what is going to be, because sometimes they will potentially also be thinking about, I am going to lose this job, because if they are going to seek refuge, which is going to take them somewhere else, that might not enable them to be able to come into the workplace, or if they are so scared that their partner might follow them into their workplace, etc., they might not even come into work or want to come into work. So there's definitely implications for the workplace as well.
Yeah, and I think they might also react differently to things that happen in the workplace as well. So there might be an incident or something that happens that might generally be thought to be reasonably minor. It might be inappropriate or not helpful, but it might be a bit not really serious. But actually someone who's going through domestic abuse where perhaps they're experiencing things in their home life, coercion, control, financial abuse, whatever it is, and they might just see what's happened in the workplace very differently because they're experiencing that. So it's a difficult environment, but we want to try and encourage people again to come forward if they're having issues and talk to their line manager. And I thought what was really nice as well was that they're now doing an initiative to help people that come to them and are in the refuge or in their properties that they look after and have left the environment they're in, how they're doing an initiative to get them back to work, helping them with CV support and interview support and making sure they've got a nice suit or something appropriate to wear so they can go to an interview. I thought that was really nice because it takes it full circle, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and it's really important because when people are in work, it gives them a greater sense of purpose, doesn't it?
Yeah.
To be able to cope with in the most unfortunate situation that they may find themselves in, which is give up everything and then go into a refuge to start rebuilding their life. So going back into work is one of the absolute positive steps to rebuilding their life and gaining some sort of control, financial freedom for themselves as well.
Yeah, some financial stability. It's actually a really good way to start that recovery then, to think that you might be able to move out of refuge and somewhere else. Yeah. So we covered a lot, and of course listeners could go back and listen to any of these individual podcasts in more detail, can't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would actually recommend that people do go back and revisit, because for each of the episodes, we dive a bit deeper into the topic for discussion, and there are some wonderful tips from all our guests on each of those topics. So yes, I would highly recommend that you go back and listen. If you listened and you've forgotten about it, or if you haven't listened yet or watched it yet, I'll fully encourage you to do so. Yeah, and do refer to each and every one of them, because there are some golden nuggets in each episode.
Yeah, they are. Okay, so I think that's probably wrapping up our summary for this time. So thank you ever so much for listening. And if you would like to get involved in the podcast, you can always contact us at hrvoices@hrindependence.co.uk. If you would like to be a guest on the podcast, then say use that same email address and let us know. We're always happy to hear if someone's got a topic that they would like to share, or if there's a topic you think we should be covering, then by all means get in touch. And we hope to get some more guests on and speak to you next time. So thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye.
Right, thank you. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of HR Voices. If you have a topic you'd like us to cover or would like to be a guest, we'd love to hear from you. Connect with us on social media or email us at hrvoices@hrindependence.co.uk. Tune in next time.